How does her popularity compare to her Republican rival Donald Trump? Well, let's have a look at some of the polling numbers. Taking an average of polling data a year ago today, Hillary Clinton had a commanding 16-point lead over Donald Trump. But what a difference a year makes. Before the party conventions began, Donald Trump had already cut the Democratic nominee's lead to 6 points. But Hillary Clinton was still ahead, of course. However, in the past week, since the Republican Party convention in Cleveland, Donald Trump has actually taken the lead in the poll polls. He's on 45.6% compared to Hillary Clinton's 44.7%. So almost neck and neck. It's the first time he's been ahead by a whisker since April, and by the biggest margin. But this is the national picture. How could the candidate's popularity at state level affect the polls? Well, with me is Frank Luntz, the Republican pollster. And very good to see you, Frank. And the gap that Donald Trump has made up over the past year and the past few months, he seems to have the wind in his sails, but of course he's got a bit of a convention bounce, would you say?
He did, but what matters isn't the national polling. It's what happens in Florida, Ohio, and right here in Pennsylvania. These three states, in essence, determine who the next president is, and in all three states, Hillary Clinton has a 1, 2, or maybe 3-point lead, well too narrow to make a projection at this point.
Just explain to a British audience why that is, why an election in a huge country like this comes down to a handful of states.
Well, the first thing I want them to know is that we are literally several hundred feet above the ground right now, and if you're afraid of heights as I am, you got to hold on to this thing.
Yeah, hold on tight.
It's amazing what you will do to bring the news to your audience. So America's vote is not by the popular vote, it's by the Electoral College. And so every state has a number of electoral votes based on how many House members and senators they have. This is how we've operated for the last 220 years. And we've had a situation as recently as 2000 when one candidate actually won more popular votes, Al Gore, but won less electoral votes, which is what allowed George W. Bush to become the president.
And so you mentioned the key role of this handful of states. One of them we're in, and Ohio you mentioned. Of course, that's where the Republicans held their convention. This is deliberate, is it then, because they want to address these electorates directly?
Except that when the convention was chosen a year, everyone knew Ohio would be in play. Nobody thought Pennsylvania would be in play, and this is what's happened in the last 6 months. Working class voters, those that are just below the middle class, people in American terms who have, say, $40,000, $45,000 in income, in British terms, maybe 28, 32,000 pounds, they traditionally vote Democrat over Republican by 3-2, if not 2-1. Donald Trump is almost even with those voters, which is what gives him the potential to win. Conversely, he is doing much worse among Latino voters and among women than most Republicans do, which is why you've got a dead heat.
Does it matter that neither of the candidates seem to be very much liked, and in Hillary Clinton's case, trusted as well?
We've never had a campaign where both candidates have less than 1/3 of Americans who think favorably of them. We've never had a presidential candidate where 68% don't trust them in Hillary Clinton's case. In fact, if you put the numbers together, 1 out of every 3 Americans dislikes both presidential candidates. So what does that mean? The election will be won by the person who they dislike and distrust the least. It's a pretty sad state of American politics.
Isn't it? But it's been said that Donald Trump has burned too much capital with those groups you mentioned, with Latinos, with women. Can he possibly win, and can he win substantial votes from those sectors?
It requires him to do better among working class voters, among male voters, than Republicans normally do. Same token for Hillary Clinton. You can't find a white male who's voting for her. And that's and Bill Clinton, for example. It's both candidates. If you looked at them objectively, you would say that neither of them can get elected. That both candidates are so disliked, so distrusted, and frankly just don't have it. But someone has to win.
Aren't the Democrats banking on that statistic that is a proportion of the electorate, those white males you're talking about, are dropping and dropping and dropping?
Right. Well, if you look around here, this is a much more diverse convention than the Republicans. There are so many more people of color. There's so many more younger voters here than at the Republican convention. And they're counting on those people turning out in numbers that they normally don't do in America. Look, the younger you are, the less likely you are to vote. The Democrats are to win. They need that young vote turnout and gin up the turnout of people of color.
Fascinating. And Frank, you and I were talking just before we came on air. Do you see any similarities, particularly in the movement behind Donald Trump, with the Brexit vote in the UK?
I do, and our polling had it dead on. Our poll, which is published on the day of the election, we had Leave beating Remain by 2 points. And it's one of the reasons why Trump exceeded everyone's expectations. They don't tell the pollsters the truth. They tell the pollsters what they think they want to hear. It was tougher to say you wanted to vote to Leave than it was vote to Remain. So number one, there's a hidden vote. Number two, there's a level of anger and frustration behind that Leave vote, a sense of betrayal by the elites in both business and politics. That sense of betrayal exists in America. And number three, they felt empowered in Britain. They felt like they really could take control of their future. That's what Trump voters feel here. And that's why you cannot call it. We are 107 days away from the election. It is way too close to call.
Well, you've just answered my question. I was going to say, but if you were calling it now, which way would you call it?
She's got a lead. I believe she will have a lead, I should say. When this is all done, next Monday or Tuesday, she'll be up a couple of points, but well within the margin of error. It's all going to be the debates, and I want to have the drinking game. If you can connect me, because you guys know drinking, I want to be the one that creates the drinking game that determines who wins the debate. So every time that Donald Trump calls her corrupt Hillary, or every time Hillary says the Donald, you have to drink.
Okay. Might be falling off this stage, I think.
I certainly hope not.
Frank, thank you very much indeed. And